Hello adventurers, and welcome to Branson, Missouri, where today I am going on an adventure and showing you something really cool that we haven't seen before. Now, on the way to get to Branson, we had to endure a lot of things. It was a little intense. The road from Texas to Missouri was riddled with storms, and this is what it looked like. We are here. We're at the Veterans Memorial Museum, a place that I have never taken you before. So let's roll the intro and get right to it. Inside, we're starting off with this statue, which is the largest military bronze statue in the world. It is 70 feet long and weighs 15 tons. There are 50 individual characters, each representing one of the 50 states, and set to honor not only those who served in World War II, but also who currently serve in the military. Now let's go find Texas. Here it is, Sammy Dawson Petty from Texas. And this is Mr. Sammy Dawson Petty. Now, as you'll notice, there is a very long line of soldiers, but they are all led by one man. This man right here. And this man right here has a very significant place in the sculptor's heart. This was a relative of his, and so he is set to lead the charge. He was from Nebraska. You can read all about it over on my blog or just come out here yourself, but this is called Storming the Beach, and it is epic. For this next little piece, we have the 118th Bandits. Now, this has a lot of significance. So this helicopter right here, this big, huge helicopter did so many things. It could fly 300 nautical miles, and it could go up to 1,900 feet off of the ground at any given time. It could fly at 135 miles per hour, but it typically cruised at about 125. But that is just the beginning. Now we're gonna move inside and do something absolutely epic that I have never done in Branson before. Entering in the first room, there's already so many cool things. This entire room is filled with different uniforms and stories about the people who wore those uniforms. A very cool way to start the story of learning a little bit more about this amazing museum. And then look at this. This is the USS Missouri. Now, we have been on a similar kind of ship when we were down in Texas a while back and visited a few places that are similar in nature since, but just seeing the scale of the model and then thinking about those places that we visited, super cool. Look at this, guys, such a different way to send off the troops than how they're sent off now. All of these people came out to show support. That is amazing. Let's move down this hall and see all of the different things that might have been affiliated with all of these troops. Starting with this. There's gonna be some guns in this, guys. If you don't like guns, click on to another video. But this is part of war and part of history, so I wanna share all of this. Look at this, guys. So this case right here has a lot of information about this guy. And it's talking about his service and where he went. And he was actually wounded in action. And this was his uniform. Look at the old war posters. They have several of these around. And a little known fact was that a lot of the cartoon creators turned to creating things for the war, and many of them also helped design some of these posters. So this right here was left behind by the Germans, and they also left behind these right here. As you can see here, 35 of those shells were approximately $70,000 back then. Wow. Look at this. It is a cootie comb. And if you're reading this, you're reading right. It's to remove lice. Okay, so here we have movies that all kind of go along with the war. Some are cartoons, some are shorts. We're gonna sit down and see what they have.
Were demolished beyond repair. Direct hits were scored on hangars and these were badly shattered.
As we pass by this wall, there is one face for every 2 Americans that were killed during the war. And there are over 62,000 faces along this wall. At first, whenever you walk past it, you just think it's this big brownish colored wall. But when you get close, you see the faces. And wow. So here in the States, we had these internment camps for Japanese, and they were also known as relocation centers. So this one is the one in Wyoming. There's another one in Arkansas that actually has a really interesting past that relates to pop culture, strangely. But in these places, people were tagged basically like this, and then after being held for a certain amount of time, then, as you can see here, they could become Japanese Americans and could officially be citizens. This is a baby life raft. As you can see, there's a little baby inside. But even more interestingly, they had a baby gas mask. And they don't look all so different, except for this pipe thing. Men weren't the only one who were in the war effort. Look at all these women. They're doing their part as much as they can and getting paid only about 40 bucks per week. This guy right here, along with this flight crew, were responsible for the bomb drop at Hiroshima. And this display tells a little bit more about that. Now, if you've never seen the movie Wind Talker with Nicolas Cage, you should watch it because it is very significant to this section right here. Now, this would have been a portable surgical table and all of the different things that they might have carried with them. Let's just talk about the size of this surgical table, though. If you'll notice here, it's not even 2 full feet across. And in modern days, I don't think most of us would have fit on this. I know I wouldn't. Right here we have a pump organ that a chaplain might carry around, and it folds up, as you can see, has little hinges. It collapses down. Everything had to be mobile. In the far back is a 100-pound bomb. So the size of an average child. Here, we have a 250-pound bomb, so the size of a grown and somewhat husky man. And this one is the big guy, 500 pounds. As I'm browsing around here, I'm seeing things that kind of make sense. Military uniforms, pictures, information, and then I found this guy. It kind of threw me off a little bit. I didn't know what exactly to say about him. So here he is. Did you know that it was not uncommon for soldiers to have exact replicas of their uniforms sent home to their children so that their children could feel closer to them? These are really neat, and they're pint-sized. HW is looking a lot like W there. This is about the presidents that have actually gone to war. It shows a little bit more about them. Look at this. This is cool. And then you can see Kennedy looking a little bit like Ron Howard there, Nixon, and Johnson. And this is what some of the homecomings looks like. This was one of the code talkers, so that was really epic. And as you can see, there's so much joy when people did return, because a lot of people didn't have that satisfaction. Now, in the previous room, we saw a photographic representation of how many people were lost. But in this next room, all of the names of those who actually were lost are listed up on the walls as an honor and a memorial. So this is a lot, guys. It's a whole lot. Strolling through this really puts it into perspective of the human impact of the war. And it just goes on and on and on. Inside this room, you will also find displays like these in the center here. And each one of these has a significance as well. This one, for example, was a person who was killed in the line of duty, and it shows his impact. Although he wasn't very old, he made a vast impact. These children right here were all named after him as a result of his heroic bravery and his impact on those around him. And his mother even wrote a book to kind of memorialize her son. So this entire row is just countless stories, very similar to that. Moving into this next section of the museum, if you are easily triggered by swastikas or German paraphernalia, just ignore this part, move on. This is a war museum, and this does cover a lot of different aspects of war. This, as you can see, is a POW identification card, and it shows here that this photograph was taken less than a year before he was captured. So there is a difference between the two photos. This story did have a happy ending, however, because he was freed later by Russians. So that is a very big positive. A lot of people who were captured were not as fortunate, but this encapsulates the entire story of one man. you can see from the posters that were presented by other countries during this time, they had a much more grim approach than the United States war posters. And that's reflected right here. They're very gruesome and morbid. Now, very similar to the Holocaust Museum when we visited, many of the images here are very graphic. And if you are not comfortable with seeing them, I would go through this area a little bit more quickly, but I am going to show a few of the photos and also, as you can see, some of the things that might have been seen at that time. In no way, shape, or form do I endorse these beliefs, nor does the museum. They just want to put the information out there in an educational way so that you can come and see it and understand from the past so we can move forward to a better tomorrow, not making the same mistakes as were made in the past. Much like today, in places that boast a lot of propaganda, they always had photos which would depict things in a much better light than they were. These pilots were about to go off to their final mission as kamikaze pilots. Meanwhile, these prisoners of war were given food to take a photo and make them look like they were well taken care of, only to be subjected to these meals being taken away right after. These are the uniforms you might have expected to see from the Japanese. During the time of concentration camps, I want you to think of the number of people we just saw in the other room. That was approximately 120,000. However, that number was dwarfed by the amount of people that were killed in the concentration camps in the most brutal of conditions. That number was 12 million. So for all of the lives that we saw that were lost by just Americans in the other room, there were so many more who were lost through these brutal conditions of concentration camps. And that's a number that should stick with you when we're going through this section. 12 million people were killed brutally. There was no niceties about it whatsoever. This fact is actually something I never knew. The swastika actually was an ancient Indian symbol for good luck and prosperity before the Nazis tainted it. It's amazing how one group can take something that's pure and turn it into something so evil. On a much more bright and positive note, this is actually one of the uniforms that was worn by legendary singer Boxcar Willie. Passing from this area into the next room, we now are moving into the Korean War. And this room is a bit smaller, but still has a lot of impact. And as you can see, it is filled with various uniforms and pieces of information. This is a rocket launcher, guys, and it is about the same height as me. And I'm 5'6". So can you imagine carting that around? Oh, but wait, this is one of the pieces of ammunition. So this plus this, how strong are you feeling? That is mind-boggling. It's large. Now, as we move to the back of the room here, you can see there is a wall of names once again, and this is all of the people who lost their lives in the Korean War. So this was a very hard time for America. Just time after time after time, things like this were happening. You can see here it says during this conflict they suffered 142,091 casualties, 52,246 dead, and 4,178 captured or MIA. This is not including everyone, of course, in these other brigades. This was just the United States suffering. Following shortly after the Korean War, we entered into what is considered to be probably one of the most problematic, still to this day, the Vietnam War. And the reason why a lot of people say this is because of the mental health impact toll it had on those returning, as well as those who were lost. So if you've watched a lot of the war movies, they do focus on this particular time frame, and they do give a pretty good illustration, but we are going to go through and see some of the many things that they have in this particular room. This is interesting. This is something that would be sewn into their jackets to ensure their safety. Basically saying that they are Americans, but if they don't turn them in, they will be given a reward. This man is one of the many who are still missing in action from this horrific war. And this case displays several of his achievements and uniforms as a lasting reminder of his legacy. These are many of the images that to this day we still think about when we think about the Vietnam War. We think of movies and TV shows like MASH and how they depicted things. And many of these photos look like they're in extremely serene environments, when in fact they are in the middle of an engulfing war. Now picture this. This gun right here fires approximately 500 rounds per minute. This man right here was thought to be lost at war, and after many years and continued research, after 50 years, they were able to identify his remains after a crash was observed, and DNA evidence was able to be collected, and he was able to be returned to his home 50 years later. And as you can see from these cases, these stories just continue on and on with these recounts that are listed in the cases, along with many of these items. As you can see along this wall are all of the names of those who were lost in the Vietnam War, and this list is considerable. But keep in mind that not all the people who suffered were on these walls, because there were still so many who were MIA or returned home only to have disastrous things happen in their lives following that. So this wall is a small representation. And now we move into the next room. Now this room is a bit smaller, but we do have several different conflicts represented in this one room. So as you can see, the room is not as vast, but there's a lot of different things. Now inside this case, as you can see, we have some Iraqi paraphernalia, and there is something extremely unsettling about this chair. This was a torture chair that was used. And basically, as you can see, they would attach electricity to this bottom portion, and it would burn and electrocute anyone who sat in it. Featured in this case are some people who actually were a part of NOAA. And if you ever check out any of the things that have to do with weather and monitoring, NOAA is a big part of that. Inside here we have more pieces from Iraq. And these were even some of the soda cans that were brought back from Iraq. Notice there's a few brands here that might look kind of familiar. Pretty sure that's Pepsi. These were some of the officer shoulder bands from Iraq, and there's even a maintenance log with Saddam Hussein's face right there on it. That's interesting. I'm pretty sure that everything that this man touched, he felt like he had to put his face on. And it would be totally different if it wasn't that he was just so full of himself, but he clearly was. Now, because this room does carry such a different and diverse group of conflicts, you will find several of these boards documenting the casualties. Unlike the larger rooms, these casualty lists are much smaller, and because of that, we are very grateful. However, we do want to go ahead and pay our respects and honor those who did fall, and you can find each of these conflicts on these boards. That being said, we enter into the last room, and this room is extremely hard to see. This is the one that really hits home the hardest, I think, because these are the people who didn't make it, and various images of that. So as you come in here, it's kind of got a little bit of a different feel to it. This is one of the many photos of Arlington National Cemetery. These are the uniforms of Navy SEAL Commander John Scott Hannon, who served his country extremely proudly and even was hand-selected following 9/11. After leaving the military, he actually succumbed to non-war related hidden problems stemming from his service. Much like I said with Vietnam, a lot of the people who serve our country now so bravely actually end up coming home and suffering from far greater things than we could ever fathom. PTSD is a real thing, and a lot of soldiers come home with that and don't know how to get back into the real world and do things after some of the horrific things that they've seen. So places like this are extremely important, and supporting the people who have served so bravely to defend us is really important, guys. I know this is a weird stop in Branson, but I hope that today you have gained some wonderful knowledge and it inspires you to go and seek out places like this in your own area. Or if you happen to come to Branson, definitely come and check this out. It is worth the stop. It is very worth the knowledge that you will gain. And I am so happy that I stopped today. Until next time, guys, bye.